I know that this Ph.D. is the first on my father's side, and he's smiling. And I know that it's the second on my mother's side, and my grandparents all the way around are smiling. I am so blessed. First, giving honor and recognition of the divine and holy presence, gratitude for my esteemed dissertation committee, whom I'll introduce in a moment. Those 10 of us here who are live and socially distanced, and the many with whom we have virtual connection across the United States and Canada. We have a lot of folks that are here from all over the place. Family, friends, colleagues, mentors, and those whom I've not yet met, I'm sure. I honor each of us in this community witness circle as a part of the divine. As we breathe the sacred breath of unity and harmony, I claim this time as smooth, informative, filled with ease and grace and fun and delight and successful completion. In gratitude, I call this circle open and activated as we bless this moment of realization together. I know that the Divine Collective supports and endorses this sacred project and the presentation of it and brings it to full fruition. Releasing this word in truth, in joyous expectancy and anticipation, I declare it so, and so it is. Amen. Aho. Ashe. And so thank you all for being here. And it is my honor to give some appreciation first for my esteemed dissertation committee. And Shireen, this is where, if you can spotlight them, this would be great. You've already seen the awesome Dr. May Elawar, who is my chair. She is core faculty of transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies, a mighty scholar in women's studies with a focus on bridging spirituality and religion with social justice activism, who has walked by my side as a trusted advisor, my professor, well before becoming my chair. I admire her dedication, her diligence, her caring heart, her scholarship, her excellence, particularly having had a candidate to defend yesterday, and I saw Dr. Adiba Dieterville on the line, and me today, and Monday, Vincent Brown, 3 in a row back to back, Dr. May rocks. And we have Dr. Joanne Gazawa, who is an internal core faculty member in transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies. She's a scholar in cultural and transpersonal dimensions with a focus on contemplative pedagogy, for whom I first learned about organic inquiry as a research approach when she was a guest lecturer in my feminist critical theory class. I am eternally indebted to you and grateful, Dr. Gazawa, for the introduction to this magnificent space of organic inquiry, which I will talk about more in a bit. It totally suits me as a co-inquirer, and it totally suits the work. So I welcome you. And Shireen, I see my beloved Addie Rose on screen. Do we have Dr. Gazawa?
So right now, Dr. Gazawa, Dr. Keating, and you, Reverend Sunshine Michelle, are all spotlit from my vantage point. So
statement. Oh, good. Okay. Well, Addie Rose is coming beside me. That's cool. Very good. And last but not least, we have Dr. Anna Louise Keating, who is my external committee member. She's a professor extraordinaire. You should see her CV. It goes on and on. She's a professor of multicultural and gender studies at Texas Women's University. She's an author. She's a Gloria Anzalduin scholar who is my idol. She's a lecturer and so much more. I hope to take one of your classes one day, Dr. Keating, or maybe even guest lecture with you, who knows. I have learned so much from you and your work and admire it well before you agreed to be on this committee. I have so much honor and respect for you, and I've cited you so much in my work. And I've greatly appreciated your responsiveness and your praise of my work, which has confirmed my budding scholarship. So, so grateful. A word of thanks to the Transformative Studies program staff and faculty, including Dr. Kathy Littles, who is no longer there. My technical editors, Leslie and Laura, the document is with them as we speak. I'm blessing that. I have 2 people here from my beloved Thrive community on drum. I have Kele Ntoto, who is one of, if not the baddest drummers in the Bay Area. And here's the thing. I had a dream in March that I was defending. I was far from completion, far from defense. And Kelly was there drumming. So I know that when I hear Spirit's call, I need to follow it. So Kele said, yes, he's here. You may not hear him drumming, but he's here. He's drumming to Mother Gaia, whatever she tells him to drum to. So bless you, Kele. And you've heard me call his sister Shireen's name. Shireen Badawi is on our text, is the tech support. And so thank you, Shireen. This is a Yo Woman's work that I know you are up for, and I thank you so much for doing so. Can somebody take some pictures? I have to take it as it comes, you know. Okay, I have, I want to say Juan Ross's name. Juan, if you're out there, has kept my computer healthy during the 5 years of this program. And anybody knows that that is so important for any student, let alone a doctoral student. So Juan, thank you. It means so much. My writing circles, the Love Beams and the Gaia Girls, I know you're out there. You have been my lifeline, and I hope I've been yours. I have many spiritual circles and spiritual communities, so I thank you for keeping me in consciousness so that we could be here now. My Angelic Realm team, the Sacred Sister Circle, family and friends, I thank you all. Okay, Shireen, now if you can share the screen. You have the slides, right? There's nothing I'm supposed to do. There we go. Can you make it big? Okay. So as Dr. May told you, the title of this work is Sacred Sister Circles for Women of Color, a Feminist Participatory Action Organic Inquiry Exploring Authentic Self-Expression, which I'll get more into and tell you about. It's a 5-chapter qualitative dissertation. This presentation will I'll walk you through key elements of the scholarship in order to remain timely, which we're already a little behind, but I've already declared that. That's why you hear me talking so fast. This is a lot to get through. So I'm gonna zoom through it. And if there's any questions afterwards, then we can come back to that. And sometimes I may have you read on the screen and keep going. Next slide, please. So the first chapter is the introduction. The inquiry is what empowers authentic self-expression within US-born women of African, Latinx, and/or indigenous descent. And Dr. Dieterbill, I learned yesterday in your defense that ascendant is the right term instead of descent. So I'll see if I can work that out. I love that, so thank you very much. For the purposes of this, it's descent. The thesis, women of colors who express authentically experience inner freedom and liberation and are a powerful force of social healing within the community and in the world. Next slide. So here's my brief story about authentic self-expression. I've had a curiosity for many years about authentic self-expression. The inquiry first started within myself through self-reflection, spiritual practice, growth, and evolution. I noticed that I didn't fully bring myself to certain situations, and I was curious about why. As with most inhibitors, it starts and ends with fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being excluded or rejected, fear of stepping outside of societal and familial norms and being seen as different. The more I explored, the more I grappled with my fears, the more courage, strength, and faith I found in my own voice, in my own rhythm and direction. Even though I was rejected, judged, excluded, and many of my fears were confirmed, the strength, courage, and faith I found were greater. The more I stepped out, the more empowered I felt from within. As authenticity was deepening within me as a way of being genuine from an inner realization of self, I realized it had to be inclusive of my cultural views, perspectives, and influences. Excuse me, Freddie, can you give me my phone? I think that's mine from, I'm sorry it's not silenced, it was, but we were gonna do Zoom on my phone, so. Thank you, Kelly. If y'all are trying to tell me something on my phone, now's not the time to do it. Thank you, Freddie. As authenticity was deepening within me as a way of being genuine from an inner realization of self, I realized it had to be inclusive of my cultural views, perspectives, and influences, thereby creating the space for my whole, true, and full self in my total experience. I was my own experiment and laboratory. The curiosity grew within me to wonder about if and how other people with non-normative social identities and intersections like me experience the same, such as gender, race, and ethnicity, sexual orientation, and physical ability. This led me to design a Sacred Sister Circle for this dissertation to explore how women of colors related to authenticity. Next slide. There are definitions of terms that are included. This is a 250 some odd page document, so y'all can imagine it's pretty dense, right? So I'm not gonna go through all of it, but some of it is really important for you to understand, for my committee to understand, for you too, because this is our work. Women of colors, I pluralize on purpose, women of colors, because it's used to reflect the vast multiplicity within women of colors. The Black and brown women in this project share similar yet varied lived experiences involving oppression, marginalization, and hope. The three populations that were chosen were specifically chosen given my familiarity with them and inclusion in the group. Authenticity is a core practice in this work, and my definition is a way of being genuine and true. For the purposes of this inquiry, this signifies an inner authenticity and integrity where one can express from an inner truth, from one's full, whole, true self and potential, including all forms of identity orientation, social difference, and the intersections of both. Other definitions of authenticity were explored within the multidisciplinary literature, such as sense of beauty, ethic, honesty, sincerity, original and authentic culture, or even authentic female. In agreement with the concept that culture can impact and help to construct social identity, I surmise that in order for one to express authentically as an individual, they need to be able to do so from an inner place within their own culture and identity, not from the cultures or identities created through appropriation of language practices and a false sense of belonging. Empowerment, I define as the sense of and degree to which one feels self-assured, confident, and inspired to action. Self-expression is one's ability to, again, these are my definitions, but I explore the literature in the work. Self-expression is one's ability to communicate and behave from their own space of individuality, an inner sense of original thought and way of being, innate preferences, desires, and ways of knowing and operating in the world. Non-normative spaces is the antithesis of what Sister Bell Hooks calls, it's a mouthful, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And as she says, quote, interlocking systems of domination that define our reality. Women of colors and others who are outside of this normative space are required to operate in what Melissa Harris Perry calls the crooked room, which is neither adequate, benefiting, or respectful to our cultures, identities, and intersectionalities. Next slide, Shireen. So there was a vast amount of literature that was reviewed in this work. Feminist of color scholarship and literature are used as a critical theoretical framework, both classic and contemporary, such as those listed on the slide. There are so many, and this is only to name a few, many of whom are my favorites and my idols, and I'm sure some of you as well. And I'm sure there are plenty more. The scholarship has allowed me to develop a deeper sense of the lived experience of women of colors in the United States from the voice of the oppressed and the resilient. The literature confirmed from a scholarly narrative, confirmed from a scholarly narrative the tensions between the dominant norms and the ability to express authentically through theories, cultural stories, and values that validate our own unique realities. A poetic prose emerged during my research that is included in the second section of the literature review called the R43 Tribute that I had hoped to recite to you today, but I'm not unable to. It's a 4-minute piece, and maybe at the end, if we have time in the Q&A, I'll do so. So the next slide is going to be an acknowledgement of the power and the impact of this R43. And as you can see, I'm going to ask you to read. I'll call out a few of the words. The scholars who are listed, I was inspired by, and this is where this poetic prose came from. And it just tells you of what women of colors have been through: reclamation and recuperation and recognition, resurgence, recreation, return, recover, recalibrate, resurrect, recapture, reconceptualize, reinterpret, rebirth, and it goes on and on. Next slide. There are 4 sections included in the literature review. You can see them here. When I first started, because I was working on empowerment, I thought I was going to look at where we are and where we're going. And my ancestors snatched my collar and pulled me back and said, no, 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 baby, you need to look at where we came from before you can see where we're going. So the first section, of the literature review is on historical oppression, marginalization, and transgression. Then we can look at how we rise to resilience, survivance, and thriving. You know, women of colors, people of color for that matter, and especially women of colors, have risen through so many trials and tribulations over and over and over to triumph and to succeed. And we're still doing that. Survivance, I want you to know, is more than surviving. And he's not cited here. Glancy and Smith are the scholars who talk about this. Survivance is more than just surviving. It's an action, it's a verb, it's rising into thriving. As Smith describes it, quote, survivance accentuates the degree to which Indigenous people and communities have retained cultural and spiritual values and authenticity in resisting colonialism, end quote. The next section is on authentic self-expression, and it's defined, as I mentioned before, as an inner realization and genuine sense of self, inclusive of cultural views, perspectives, and influences. Authenticity is a core principle in this inquiry, obviously, and is described in detail in the work, including other authors and scholars. Some of you know of Dr. Brene Brown, who is a scholar and seminal thinker on the topic of vulnerability and shame. And she is well cited in my work, given the partnering of vulnerability and authenticity, which typically come together. In order to be vulnerable, one is usually touching their authenticity. And in order to touch one's authenticity, there needs to be vulnerability. I envision meeting and doing work with Dr. Brown, particularly since my work focuses on women of colors, which hers has been known to exclude, but I believe she's reconciling that. What a partnership we could be, right? And then the last section of the literature review, the impacts of authentic self-expression on the individual and the community, and the benefits that are included therein. And community is, however we define it, certainly as family, friends, and other definitions in spaces of belonging. Next slide. The third chapter is methodology, which means the framework and how the research will be approached. A word about centering decolonizing research methodologies. Westernized approaches to research can have a negative cultural effect, particularly with people outside of normative white, heterosexual, male-dominated spaces of identity and intersection. Therefore, decolonized research methodologies are used to prevent harm to the participants who have historically felt studied, researched, and experimented on, and to bring equitable research lens to the project. Next slide. Feminist Participatory Action Organic Inquiry, FPAOI. I'm gonna break that down, and I'm so excited and thrilled to say this is my original contribution to this work, which a PhD should have original contributions to the scholarship. Feminist of color scholarship is used as a theoretical critical framework, as I mentioned earlier, and honors race, gender, sexuality, and an ontology of being that surpasses the normative identity labels, and intersectionalities of which we are most familiar. Participatory action research, PAR, is a methodological practice that is community-based and action-oriented with shared collaborative participation with all participants as co-researchers, not just one researcher studying a group. I refrain from this is important, I refrain from the use of the terms research and researcher in this inquiry when I can. I use the terms co-inquirers instead of co-researchers, inquiry instead of research, and initiating inquirer instead of researcher to acknowledge the drama that research and experimentation has done over time to people of color. This is a way to prioritize decolonizing research methodologies. If and when these traditional terms of research are used, it is sparingly and with the highest honor and respect that I can engage. I personally served in dual roles in this inquiry as both the initiating inquirer and the co-inquirer in the Sacred Sister Circle, which I'll talk about, which Gloria Anzaldúa terms the Nepantlera, or quote unquote, the threshold people living in multiple worlds, end quote. Organic inquiry, OI. Organic inquiry is an approach which allows for the presence of the intuitive, synchronistic dreams, spirituality, and the liminal space of infinite possibility. And those of you who know me know I live in this space. I'm deeply rooted in my spirituality and I'm highly intuitive, so the two partnered very well. So therefore, feminist participatory action organic inquiry is a combined methodological approach and original contribution derived from this inquiry that is important in the exploration of the cultural, sacred space of transformation with all of the components previously described in a participatory action space within a feminist of color's worldview that naturally allows for and engages the space of the numinous, synchronistic, and intuitive. Next slide. So the method and demographics. The method that I used is the Sacred Sister Circle, which will be termed SSC. I didn't put it on the slide, but I will say SSC when I can. This inquiry was completed through this method of the Sacred Sister Circle, and circle format, many of you know, is an age-old indigenous practice used in community for healing, restoration, and transformation. In fact, restorative justice circles you hear a lot about have to do with those who are incarcerated facing as the accused, facing those who they harmed, and there's healing that happens in that. It's being used in the school system, so circles are so powerful as they were in the Sacred Sister Circle. I've been convening Sacred Sister Circles for years, and some of you on the call have been on them. And it's a sacred space of healing within community. Being a ritualist, I've always had an affinity for creating sacred space, particularly with women. The Sacred Sister Circle fit well within the FPAOI space. The demographics, as you can see here, there were 9 of us who met for 7 months on a monthly basis for 3 hours each time in the safe space of an intentional community on the Berkeley-Oakland border. There was a formal selection process that was based on the extended network for women, based on my extended network, excuse me, for women who were interested and available and fit 4 basic criteria. Age 21 or older, there was no age maximum. Identify as a woman, US born, and be in one of the 3 African, Latinx, or indigenous ascendant, Adiba, populations that were cited. The aim for the group size was a minimum of 6 to have a solid group experience and a maximum of 12 so that the group wouldn't be too unwieldy and remain intimate. All 9 co-inquirers were US born, 5 were of African ascent, and 1 of those had an 8th indigenous ascent. 3 Latinx, 1 was mixed with white, and 1 indigenous who was mixed with Latinx. Other descriptors are listed there: education, sexual orientation, etc. Next slide. So the names of our co-inquirers here are our project names. We had Indigo Flower, Lavender Earth, Peaceful Element, Firestone, Chrysanthemum Bittersweet Moon, Sunflower Child, Pluto Fire, Calm Heart, and Guardiana de la Tierra, to call their names out loud. Thank you, sisters. Next slide. We had lots of activities that we did over that 7-month period. Rituals were used to call in the sacred space of the SSC, of our ancestors, and to create a sanctuary of safe space for the co-inquirers to be together in exploration on the topic of authentic self-expression. I'm loving your beat. Thank you. There was also encouragement for the individual sacred work to continue in between sessions. It's all up to us how much we bring to it and how much we get out of it. We co-created working agreements so that everyone felt safe within the circle. And other activities included, as you'll see here on the slide, we co-created the altar together. We rotated inspirational offerings. We co-created a covenant together that we recited after each session. We had small and large group discussions about our experience with authenticity and authentic self-expression. There was storytelling, which is an important component of organic inquiry, as well as revisionist myth-making, which I cite Keating and Mitchell in this. Really important, really exciting. Helps us to retell the story using our imagination so that there's healing and transformation. And then at the end, there was a collective story weaving at the end of the series that showed the tapestry of our stories as sisters. We did an art project together. And more importantly, we had sacred time being together as women in circle. We bonded and provided a space of support for one another, which in and of itself, in a participatory space, is participation enough. But in the westernized view, that would be challenged. However, we're expanding that view. Next slide. A significant component of this inquiry and FPAOI method was the unexpected presence of the angelic realm as a spiritual emergence, which broadened the relevance of the inquiry for exposure to alternative and deeper ways of knowing the authentic self through spiritual awakening. What this means is that there's a person with whom I coach on our angelic realm team, Chiron Rose, who is the embodied vessel of Michael, also known as Archangel Michael. While this occurrence may challenge the belief system of some, know that it was and continues to be a vital and validated lived experience of Chiron Rose as witnessed and engaged by myself and others. The presence of Michael was a separate yet parallel occurrence to this inquiry, which embraced the aspects of organic inquiry with the numinous, synchronistic, intuitive spiritual dreams in liminal space of the divine. This unexpected presence of the angelic realm, which was tangential to this inquiry, but directly affects it given my experience, involvement, and activation as a co-inquirer. I knew I was called to this work, but I didn't know I was going to have that kind of engagement with the angelic realm, and I'm so pleased by it. It has occurred over the past 2 years and has provided phenomenal insight and awareness of the imperative for authentic self-expression, balance of feminine energy and leadership during these times. This is important, people, listen, and the diversity and multiplicity, which I know many of you know. The oversaturation and imbalance of male domination and white supremacy has been confirmed by the angelic realm. Next slide. Findings and interpretations. So there were several data collection and methods and instruments of inquiry that are mentioned here. I'm going to take a sip of water. The authenticity check was a verbal and written response to questions about authenticity by the co-inquirers. The pulse check was a written set of questions to co-inquirers midway through the series to provide insights in their experience in the SSC. The completion survey was a written assessment of the SSC series after its completion that provided ratings in different categories about the co-inquirer's experience. There were 263 double-spaced pages of field notes taken by me as the initiating inquirer, which captured insights about the group experience as well as the personal experience as a co-inquirer. Sorry, I had to put the water down. Then there was storytelling, as I mentioned. I prefer to call it story sharing, and there's story weaving. So the co-inquirers shared stories and then retold them using revisionist myth making for healing and transformation, and we collected that. There were discussion charts from the small and large group discussions in the SSC sessions. And then there were miscellaneous emails, texts, pictures, written inspirational stories within the group. Next slide. There were 4 broad themes that resulted from this. And during the coding of the data, which was performed with another co-inquirer, 4 broad themes emerged, and the key findings and interpretations were categorized accordingly to describe them as follows. I'll go through them. These results were shared with the group at the SSC virtual reunion. We had a follow-up meeting following the completion of the series. Next slide. Safety was the first one. The theme of safety was identified, was intended to address comments where the co-inquirer felt that safety was either present or absent in the qualities they've described, including safety with self, others, and society, including family members and colleagues, etc. So the findings you'll see here, I categorized them together. All of the broad themes had three groupings that I put together. And so the first one you'll see under safety, it included, and these are in the words of the SSC in these instruments: truth, vulnerability, honesty, bravery, courage, risk, trust, fear. The next one, sense of empowerment, feeling heard, passion, creativity, or perspective. And if there was an absence of safety, it evoked guilt, dishonesty, suppression, feeling small, heavy, withdrawn, feeling unaccepted, unseen, or cowardly. Next slide. Oh no, not yet. So my interpretations, which are important as a co-inquirer, as the initiating inquirer. The data indicates that regardless of whether co-inquirers felt suppressed or empowered to express authentically, an element of safety was required. One sister said that she expressed authentically when, quote, "I feel safe, that I will not be retaliated against, and there will be no jealous violence from family or friends," end quote. The data indicates that some form of safety within self, others, and society is required for the co-inquirer to embody the qualities listed in the findings that you saw before, that you see on your screen. In the absence of safety, the data indicated that the co-inquirers would withhold themselves, and they do not express from their full true self in the experience at hand. The data broadly included physical, mental, emotional, and/or circumstantial safety, given abuses experienced by the co-inquirers. A sister responded that she doesn't express authentically when there is, quote, fear of violence. Sometimes it can be in my own head, possibly from conditioning. I have to go inside and attempt to separate what is real, authentic, and what may be false evidence appearing real, end quote. Another sister commented that what she learned about authentic self-expression through the SSC is, quote, losing the fear that I may be wrong or ignorant at times and being open to learn, end quote. A sister shared that being in the SSC with Black and brown women is, quote, being around like-minded women in a safe and loving space. This is the first step so that we can do our work feeling safe with each other, which connects us all to humankind, end quote. Another sister shared about her experience of the SSC that I saw myself in the mirror several times in that room. I revisited the wounds of my childhood, and I was able to recognize the impacts that emotional abuse has had on my life, my lack of agency. Next slide, Shireen. The next theme is acceptance, and that represented feeling accepting of self and or by others. The findings you'll see on the screen include self-acceptance, self-respect, honesty within oneself, inner listening, alignment, confident, that you know, it's a lot on the screen, and I'm not going to read all of it because I have more to go, but you get the sense of what this acceptance does for people, and then a lack of authenticity or self-expression as it pertains to acceptance. It includes judgment, caring about others' opinions, or fear. The interpretations here. A co-inquirer could have acceptance of self and express authentically without necessarily feeling accepted by others. Conversely, a co-inquirer could also feel accepted by others and not necessarily have the self-acceptance needed to express authentically within themselves. In other words, having or not having self-acceptance was not necessarily dependent on having or not having acceptance by others. However, both are optimal. A sister said in the SSC that, quote, she learned that I am bolder than I thought, more assertive than many, sensitive to my sister's plights as they resonate with my own challenges, end quote, which indicated awareness and acceptance of herself and others in the group just as they were. Another sister said, and as you can see, I'm trying to give their voice here. This is not my work, this is our work. Quote, I like the idea of showing up 100% just as you are. That helped in moving toward it, so that it's a journey towards rather than getting stuck, end quote, which speaks to self-acceptance. Another sister shared that she released the anger that, this is a quote, released the anger that I held associated with a political experience where I was thrown under the bus by women of color. And I was reminded that I was also held by people of color during that time. So it's better to release and forgive and achieve deep peace and happiness, end quote. This type of forgiveness could not take place if she did not learn to accept herself and the women of color in the situation. One sister realized in the SSC that, quote, I need to make room for myself. The fear and sense of not belonging in the world showed up in the circle, and I learned that to be seen and heard, I needed to take up my space and let go of fear. It is still a practice for me, but I did eventually feel seen and heard, a validation of my self-expression, end quote. Which not only speaks to her own self-acceptance, feeling accepted by others in the circle, but also to belonging in the group, as the next two sessions describe. May, how am I doing on time? I have a whole outline right here. I'm just going to keep rolling. Next slide, Shireen. The next two slides are about connection and belonging, the inner connection, and then the outer connection. So the first one, interconnection and or belonging, represented the level of interconnection co-inquirers had with ourselves and or with the divine connection, as well as the sense of belonging within our own identity and with others. You can see the findings, it's dense on the page, self-realization and inner strength, confidence, empowerment, alignment, self-respect, integrity, inner listening, honoring. That next bullet, being and living close to God, anything out of harmony or seemingly separate from the oneness, quote, with a capital O, in alignment with God, connected with the ultimate truth, freeing oneself, etc. And then the element of belonging was added to as a part of the theme when we had the virtual Sister Circle reunion. So they're not the same, but they're related, and that's why I put them together that way. My interpretations. The data shows that there is a correlation between one's inner self and sense of self, like self-esteem, self-respect, empowerment, confidence, and to a divine connection like intuition, inner listening, or alignment with divine truth. Similarly, the data suggests that there is a sense of belonging to oneself and in the greater scheme of life, that we are not alone. There was a sense of belonging in the sacredness of the sacred Sister Circle community that allowed for the nurturing of the inner individual self, which in turn nurtured the collective self of the group. The SSC was a safe space for the co-inquirers to get to know their inner selves more deeply in a community of sisters of color, which allowed us to nurture our divine connection and sense of belonging. A sister shared what she learned about herself while in the SSC. She says how important community work is for witnessing and holding each other accountable. How much I thrived meeting in a group with SSC. I was fed and impacted, again, on how important doing the work individually is, how important it is to honor and share our stories. There are historical stories of brown and Black women that many have forgotten. Thank you, she said. The data supports the realization of the inward connection to self and the divine yields a greater likelihood to realize one's purpose in life, or to at least be willing to explore it. However, too much inward focus without the balance of outward connection and belonging could lead to egoism or narcissism, as discussed in the next theme. A sister shared that, I also realized that I have learned to be lighter and more flexible. I've relaxed my expectations, which have always led to disappointment when not met, and allow for the spaciousness for whatever to appear without taking it personally or feeling as though the effort failed if things didn't go according to my plan, end quote. Another sister said, an old teacher of mine used to say, connection is the cure, and much of the work is action and intention of coming together and how that can be healed. Belonging feels to me to be more about your identity and the safety you feel to authentically self-express and be who you are. It's hard to draw any line between them because they're so connected, connection and belonging, she said. They're related. I'm gonna skip some of these quotes. I hate to do that, but I wanna make sure that I leave time for the rest. There was lots of data. Next slide, Shireen. So outer connection and belonging speaks to co-inquirers and how they experience their connection with other individuals, community, or society. How we express authentically outwardly in the world. The theme extends to a sense of belonging in the world in which we find ourselves. And so you can see some of the results here: happiness, sharing gifts, bringing perspectives, knowing the truth for oneself, hindrance, and when it's not there, someone says, I'm sorry, that there is a hindrance of other people's development when we hold back too much. That's important. The interpretation. The data shows that there's a correlation to one's inner sense of self and how it is displayed outwardly with individuals and community and others. Inward and outward connection and belonging are not necessarily dependent on one another, as I mentioned before. In order to express fully authentically, the goal would be to achieve balance with both the inner and the outward sense of connection and belonging. A sister stated, the Women of Color's Sister Circle has allowed me to shine as the beautiful and incredibly magnificent soul that I am. The circle benefited me and my family. It also helped make the world a brighter place, knowing that I was being held and supported by my sisters of color. Another sister said that she was reinvigorated by the idea of self-care. Not sure why, but the idea of taking time out and creating sacred space with people we don't know is powerful. And I'm skipping some of the quotes. I just feel so badly about that because I wanted you to hear them, but I won't skip this one. To end this section, a sister shared a poignant and powerful comment about her experience about connection and belonging. Being the only, as far as I know, biracial woman in the room, I felt the fear of not belonging as a not brown enough person. I felt that I needed to gain trust by staying quiet or not sharing as much in the beginning, but that only perpetuated my baggage. I had to let go and allow myself to be in my experience. For a long time in my life, I lived as a brown young woman hidden in the cloak of a white young woman as a survival mechanism, a tactic born in shame and learned from my own mother. My own grief about this, I feel, was processed in the circle without being able to truly articulate it with words. I feel accepted as I am. I feel more whole than I did in the beginning, and I feel true acceptance of my experience as a light/white-skinned Latinx woman in society. I feel inspired by all the women in our circle. It's been a beautiful time getting to know everyone in this way. I feel empowered by being in their company and strengthened in voice and in other spaces of life, like at work, family, and at school. That means so much to me. Next slide. So I added another category because I found there was an interweaving of all the themes: safety, acceptance, connection, and belonging on the inner and outer levels. And so what I did, those stories that I told you about were so important, they were so vital, that what I did was take the findings from that, use one story, story number one, and then revisionist myth-making story number two, and interpreted those. So story number one is what is showing here. And remember, they could tell any story that they wanted. So you could see that there was unworthiness, unsafety, being alone, isolated, abuse, fear, lack of acceptance, and you know, it goes on and on. Silenced, unseen, unheard, lying, anxiety. I mean, there was so much wound in here. Next slide, Shireen. And then when we took the revisionist myth-making story, we took the same story and we retold it. And for healing and transformation. So you can see the difference here, right? You can see that they felt supported, and we felt supported, seen, heard, powerful, empowered, strength, courage, emergence, resilience, safety, space, excitement, surprise, choice. You know, it just went on and on, the things that we felt as we were able to retell our story. What is the next slide, Shireen? Right, there's a little more there. So here's my interpretation. The data demonstrates that co-inquirers generally chose to tell personal and individual stories that reflected some level of pain, hurt, harm, and discontent that prevented them from expressing authentically. The data further reflects and validates the importance of the four themes previously cited as a necessity to feel free to bring our true self to life's experiences. It also confirmed the correlation to safety, acceptance, connection, and belonging on an individual level, and how women of color show up within themselves as well as with others in the world. The data also confirmed safety, these four themes that I've been talking about, and how the co-inquirers felt together in circle, that they were willing to display a sense of openness and vulnerability to explore these topics together in affinity, privacy, and confidentiality. It further shows, the data does, it illustrates the power of imagination as applied to the revisionist myth-making technique. The data indicates that there was healing and transmutation of pain, hurt, harm, and discontent into productive elements of the world, leading to the realization of wholeness and well-being. So it was really a rich experience. Next slide. So the fifth chapter. Okay. The fifth chapter is the conclusions and the recommendations. So through social movements and supportive affinity groups such as the Sacred Sister Circle, women of colors can feel supported and empowered to authentically bring all of who we are in our totality, while simultaneously leaving any old baggage that no longer serves the expression of our higher purpose. Through embrace of qualities of vulnerability, truth-telling, creativity, compassion, and sensitivity, while nurturing and exhibiting powerful leadership traits, women of colors are rising up into our own accord in spiritual, cultural, and societal, transformation and evolution. Melissa Harris Perry has, in her book, she has a space called The Cricket Room. And she says, quote, "When they confront race and gender stereotypes, Black women are standing in a crooked room and they have to figure out which way is up. Bombarded with warped images of their humanity, some Black women tilt and bend themselves to fit the distortion. Knowing what I know through this project," end quote, I'm sorry. "Knowing what I know through this project, I conclude that it is critical for women of colors to feel safe, accepted, connected, and to feel a sense of belonging within our communities in order to express as our true selves. The absence of these states of being present obstacles of guilt, fear, exclusion, and lack of appreciation. By developing strong bonds of support through sacred practices in community, such as story sharing and cultural affinity, women of colors rise and thrive in society to lead and nurture. Based on these findings, women of colors are able to express creatively and freely, share their gifts, ideas, and diverse perspectives when they feel connected and feel that they belong within the societal structure. This inquiry supports the thesis statement, women of colors who express authentically experience inner freedom and liberation that I read to you at the beginning, and are a powerful force of social healing within the community and the world. When women of colors feel an inner sense of connection and belonging, we, not they, I wrote they, we stand in our full space of strength and confidence and use our intuition and spiritual connection in service to ourselves and others. In the SSC, we co-created a sacred room where there was no longer a need for women of colors to sit crooked or to fit in a crooked room. Instead, we began learning together how to stand up straight and how to ensure that the room is straight without direct influence of white supremacy and the normative culture. We were able to show up for and just as we are, with our wounds, our pride, resilience, and the willingness to grow and heal together. This is the room in which women of colors can thrive and contribute to our fullest potential and stand straight in a room of our own making. And so let me just check my time, because if I'm almost at time, then I'm going to zoom to one last thing. I think I'm at time. I'm past time. So let me tell you this. There's more that I could say. I want to tell you about, can you advance the slide? So this is important. This is really important. My original conceptual theories and terms in this work, there's 7 of them. Yay! And I've told you about some, but some I haven't. So FPAOI, Feminist Participatory Action, Organic Inquiry, I've already talked about. The Insider Within. And so this is based on, it's a play on Patricia Hill Collins, talks about, some of you may be familiar with, The Outsider Within, which has to do with Black women being privy to the inner workings of white America with an inability to act on it with the same privilege or vantage point, thereby them being the outsider within. So the insider within came as a result of this work and the insular work that we were doing as sisters in affinity, and it allows us positionality as initiating and core inquirers when we are together. I could say more about that, but I'm going to go on because I'm at time. I had a theory called Bring 100. Some of you have heard it before, and basically it says, bring 100% of what you can. You can only bring what you have. So if you have 10%, bring 100% of that 10%. If you have 100%, bring 100% or as much as you can. And that's how you can show up fully as you are. And we need to be supported by society and in those rooms that we're in to be able to show up with whatever we have to give. The putter process is peel, uncover, discover, and recover, which basically is how we live life. And if we want to express fully, authentically, then we can peel and uncover, discover, and recover who we are from the depths of our being and operate from that. I created a guidebook in this work so that this work could be replicated. It's a guidebook for convening FPAOI Sacred Sister Circles, which I'm really proud of. And then there's the IDC factor, which is the I don't care factor. So in other words, learning how to prioritize how you feel about yourself and come with that, as opposed to looking at what others feel about you, which prevents you from doing what you need to do. That doesn't mean it's narcissism or whatever, that we don't care, but we have to learn to move past the limitations that people set on us. And then there's the Authentegrity theory, and you can see it's AWE, it's a formula. And so basically it's authenticity plus integrity equals a sense of awe, as in the numinous. And the word form of that is, by combining authenticity and integrity in one's daily experience, the action can yield a sense of awe, as in the numinous. And the more it's done, the easier it becomes, the stronger one's personal power grows when you can come from that inner place of being authentic and being in your own true integrity. And so as I close, next slide, Shireen. This inquiry required, I'm sorry to breathe so hard like that, y'all. I don't want to lose my composure here. This inquiry required for me to fully surrender in order to listen deeply to the spiritual call. It surpassed my wildest expectations. There were times that I totally doubted whether this work would be able to move forward in a viable way, given our time so heavily dictated by white supremacy, hegemony, and patriarchal practices. However, I remain encouraged when I see so many Black and brown women who have continued to find their voices and are speaking up and speaking out and acting authentically and bravely. Look at all the Black women rising up in politics, law enforcement, education, and social justice spaces. We have the first Black female candidate running for the office of Vice President of the United States of America, Senator Kamala Harris, that we get to vote for in a couple weeks. We just celebrated the centennial anniversary of the suffrage movement, yet Black women worked tirelessly on behalf of that achievement, but were not allowed to vote until much later. So, there's that. In recognition of Congressman John Lewis, I couldn't end this without saying his name, and Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who both worked so tirelessly for civil rights and women's rights. We have a legacy of strength, fortitude, courage, resilience, and love that we're continuing to build together that surpasses any hatred, any violence, any challenge that we may be facing. There are so many efforts among Indigenous women to acquire proper land rights and acknowledgements and reparations. There are so many women of color first, like Cecilia Munoz, Shirley Chisholm, Condoleezza Rice, Sonia Sotomayor, and Michelle Obama in high offices and positions, very visible, and probably many more local first than are cited. Our Black and brown women are making strides all over the place, some of whom are cited in my dissertation. Yet there are so many women of colors who feel inhibited to stand in their power on their jobs, in their families, and in the world, given our societal standards and the socialization of oppression and marginalization that still continue as we witness it crumbling. For even those who are vocal like me, who are discovering more of our true self daily, some struggle with how to show up for ourselves and in the world. This to me is the value of this inquiry, to create safe spaces for exploration and support among women in the same cultural mixes of understanding and affinity, so that we can unearth the patriarchal influences and learn a new way of being. Support systems like FPAOI, Sacred Sister Circles, which will be needed to help assist women of colors in using my putter process of peeling, uncovering, discovering, and rediscovering the space that creates safety, acceptance, inner and outer connection and belonging, so that we can confidently bring all our layers to the table, which, by the way, will be the subject of my book, based on this work, through the use of the IDC factor, Bring 100 theory, and the Authentegrity theory, and the insider within. So, Shireen, can you stop share so I can make one last statement? I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for your attention. I haven't cried yet. Your attention, your support, your participation in this community witness circle. It means a lot for this doctoral presentation. It wouldn't have been the same without you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate my ancestors and my angels so much for guiding me through this entire process and for choosing me to do this work. Blessed be.
Yay! Yay!
So,
Dr. May, you got it.
it's my, yes. Sunshine.
Oh, go ahead. I was about to go sit down.
Yeah. You. So just to let everybody know, I left that room and I'm in a different room so I can be on Zoom with all of you for this next session, where the committee will have a discussion with Sunshine Michelle Coleman. And before I open it up, I just want to take a moment to just really appreciate the work that you've done. And I'm just so, I have no words to describe how excited I am to see all those concepts and ideas and your passion and what you want to put out in the world kind of come together today in this presentation. You know, all those books and discussions and where does this go? Where does that go? But this needs to come in. It's all there. It's all there and exactly where it needs to be. So thank you for doing this work for yourself and for all of us, you know, that will stand to benefit from this. And I'm just keeping my eye on the time and want to open it up to the committee for questions. And I'll start by asking Dr. Ana Louise Keating to make a comment, ask a question, start the discussion.
But before you start, Dr. Keating, Shireen, if we only see me in the room, is there a way that we can see whoever's speaking?
The spotlight feature is new for me, and I'm getting
Okay.
different feedback from folks. But if everybody else who's not speaking could please mute yourselves, and then the people who are speaking will be highlighted. That is my
Okay.
request.
Okay, thank you. And then you can take it off spotlight, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, Dr. Keating, go for it. There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I can see you. Hi.
It's really good to see you. This was just really beautiful, really moving and really exciting work. And I'm really excited to see what you do with it next. That's very cool. I might take you up on that offer to come talk to one of my classes also.
Yeah.
I think in the interest of time, well, I have two questions actually. So let me ask you the first one. So if you were doing this, well, so let's see. I know that you had hoped that people in the circle would kind of co-lead a little more than they did. What do you attribute that to? Or what are your thoughts about, is there anything you would have done differently to change that? Or like, what are your thoughts about that?
I love the question. To be quite honest, what I learned is I think they needed to show up. They just needed a place to kind of come be. Sometimes people got there right there, or they were texting me last minute, I'm coming. One person told me that on one of those sessions, Dr. Keating, that she had 3 different conflicts, that she delegated those out so that she was prioritizing being there. So I think they needed a place to just kind of come rest. I'm excited to test out the theory, but you know, I tried to hold it as loosely as possible while giving it structure to allow it to move forward. And so I was asking at each turn, what do you want to change? What do you want to add? And many times they didn't have anything else. Now, if they were hesitant to say, because I was the initiating inquirer, I don't know. That's a research dynamic that could have been. But I really kind of believe that they just needed a space to be, and they were comfortable with what I was bringing.
That's kind of what I wondered when I was reading it. If they needed that kind of nourishment that the circle provided, and that you, as the person bringing the circle together, also kind of provided.
And somebody suggested the art project, so we did an art project. Their information was infused when they gave it, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So my next question is, if you could travel back in time to yourself as yourself began this project, what would you tell yourself about the journey?
It's hard to stump me. You know, what I'm hearing, Dr. Keating, is I wouldn't change anything, even if I would change something, because my learning was so great. And what organic inquiry talks about is how it's really important, how is the initiating inquirer transformed? And so I was transformed. As a matter of fact, I heard myself saying a couple weeks ago that I feel like I'm a swarm of butterflies, because I have been through the process. What is the process? You know, where the caterpillar, the chrysalis process. I have been through that like over and over and over. So I'm a swarm of butterflies. So I don't know that I would change anything, even my missteps. there were times I had to breathe into it. I didn't know. I wanted to stop. And then as a praying woman, I just breathed into it and prayed into it. And the next moment I had capacity. So for me, that's plenty.
Okay, that's very cool. So I guess I'll just make one more comment, and then that's it for my questions. So my other comment is, by bringing in the angelic realm, you like increase the diversity in a really fascinating way.
Yeah, well, you know.
I think that was very cool, and I really appreciated reading a dissertation that also kind of brought in that whole epistemological, ontological, ethical component. That was very cool.
Thank you for mentioning that. And I will say that I did have a conversation with one of my other committee members about making sure that because that wasn't included I didn't know that that was going to happen. That was emergent. And so to make sure that, and it was totally separate. It was a totally separate thing, but it was my experience as a spiritual person. And even if I wasn't the initiating inquirer, I would have come to the Sacred Sister Circle having had that experience, and it still would have been present no matter what. But I had to, you know, it was very distinct yet totally related because it was all about authentic self-expression. That's what they were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Keating. I want to add something to the question about what you could have done differently to have them kind of take up more ownership of the circle and say, PAR, the way we're practicing it in academia, in Western academia, we set up to do participatory and we think it has to be completely equal and there has to be some like, you know, action that we all do together and decide together. And then as we were discussing this method, Sunshine and myself, we were talking about decolonizing PAR, that the minute you sit in a circle, you're part of something larger. You're already participatory. You're already acting participatory. Whether you're the lead co-inquirer, you're the participant, participation is happening. So to move away from these expectations that we have of perfect participation, whatever that might mean. And the minute we sit in the circle, we are participatory. And that takes off a whole lot of like stress around this. When am I being participatory and when am I not? You know, we're all in the circle together. So just
and I would add to that, Dr. May, that it, you know, as an initiating inquirer, you know, I was under that Western view.
Right.
So I was feeling like at moments that I failed. Like, did I lead them, you know, overly lead them or what have you? Could I have done something different? If I would have started, maybe this is the answer to the question, Dr. Keating, if I could have started ahead of time with a different lens than westernized view of participatory action research, then maybe I would have been able to exhale more because showing up in the circle would have been enough.
And
that
that's
makes
the
sense.
article to write.
Yeah, I could sense the disappointment in some of what you wrote, which is kind of what I was asking with that question. But kind of reframing it like that, that's part of the work of like almost challenging the crooked room, right?
Yes.
Like, hey, it's crooked. Like, let's call it as crooked. Like, hey, there's something wrong with our assumptions around this research method.
Yeah, and one more thing, Dr. May, with Dr. Keating there is, you know, you brought to my attention because I talked about that conflict and that tension that I had. And even though I'm very familiar with Mother Anzaldua's work, you said it sounds like the role of the Nepant Lera that you had. And I hadn't really thought of that. And even as you presented that to me, I had to go sit and be with that. There was a point that I didn't feel like I could step into that because I just felt like I wasn't worthy of it. But then, you know, if I had to do this over again, and if I knew in advance that I was the Nepant Lera coming into this, you know, kind of birthing something for myself and for the co-inquirers, maybe it would have been a little different.
Yeah, thank you. Joanne, I'm going to invite you to ask a question, comment.
Hey, thank you, May.
Hi.
Hi, hi, Michelle. Lovely work. It's such a pleasure to see you orate it. It has so much of your energy, and it it enhances the work so much than just to read it linearly on the page, right? So thank you, thank you. I do want to start with just this appreciation of how much of the spiritual consciousness the inquiry involves, because I think that is a particularly in academic circles, that's the dimension of consciousness that is least invited. So I think just the courage
Oh, you
of,
froze. Maybe you'll come back.
We can hear her.
Okay, can you hear me, folks?
Yes.
Dr.
Okay.
Gozawa, we can hear
We
you.
can hear you.
Okay, great. So, Michelle, it seemed like your picture froze. I wasn't sure if mine was freezing as well,
I
but
did.
just to continue with my accolades here, thank you for the courage to bring in this dimension of consciousness that's most neglected in academia. You know, there's so much to ask you, but I know we're a bit short of time, and that's exactly, I think, where I want to go. That's where where my intuition says we need to go. So I recall even at the beginning of your presentation, you said, "Oh, you know, I'm a little late. We're not starting on time." Time was an issue as you were responding to Dr. Keating in terms of the sister circles themselves. People would run late. They, you know, this whole idea of, oh, we're living in a paradigm of being on time rather than being in time. Can you not hear me?
No, I'm sorry. I'm gesturing because I can hear somebody else in the room. Please.
Okay. So there's something about spirituality that is more about not the human construct of time, but in infinite time, right? So I wonder how much of a challenge this whole time construct is for you in doing sister circles. And I know that it would be a luxury for people to say, you know what, we really need to step out of that construct of time and be in retreat together for X number of days, right? And I wonder how realistic that would be as a enhanced version of sister circles. How appropriate would that be for, or possible would it be for people that you want to reach?
Actually, great question, Dr. Gozawa. I have done retreats for that, not with this body of inquiry, obviously, but with others where we spent the whole weekend together. Obviously, we weren't in COVID. However, it was interesting when it was time for the sister circles to be up. One of the sisters mentioned, wow, it's time, I could see us continue. She didn't exactly say it like that, but I opened up the space to say, I'm willing to continue past this if you are. And people are so bogged down with time that no one really responded. I think they wanted to, but they didn't have the bandwidth to. So I know that even if I would have had the sister circle space be 12 months, I don't know that I would have gotten the type of interest. I would have been having to, because people they can't make that kind of commitment. So I haven't figured that one out yet, Dr. Gozawa, but I'll keep working on it.
Yeah. When we're going against the norm or the normative paradigm, it's really difficult to create structures for transformation.
And that's part of the reason why I had space in between. Like when we first started Circle, even before we first got together, I was encouraging people that were already in Circle. The circle is not just when we're in each other's presence, it's about consciousness.
Mhm.
So when we're 3 hours together on a Saturday, when we leave here, we're still in circle. Or until we do the closing circle and we're not here anymore, and then we might still be in circle. You know what I mean? So it keeps going, even though that false narrative of the construct of time we have to govern by here as in this human body.
Well, that's a good segue to my last question. Um, I really love the insight that you had. You were talking about your experience with Mikhail, and you came across, you deepened your wisdom around the paradox of showing up authentically and modulating your light. And I always feel like we're touching the spiritual when we have insight into the paradoxical. So can you say a little bit more about that experience and what you harvested from that?
I'd love to, because he actually was emergent recently, and actually a week ago, I think he came to give me a graduation present, because unexpectedly he became emergent and told me how that he and the angelic realms were validating me and validating the work and giving me accolades, and that he mentioned my strength and my power has grown and that I'm softer. And so I've learned, I suppose, to modulate the power. Initially, he was telling me to modulate, and I had a problem with that because I'm bright. You know, I've always been bright. I've always known that, meaning I have spiritual aura, I have spiritual essence, and I stand in that power. And I think that is what has, quite frankly, made people either reticent to interact with me or to leave, because they are not sure what to do with that. And so I was challenged by being told that I was too brighter to modulate my power, when it seemed like what I'm trying to do is bring all my power. So what are you talking about? And we had a conversation about that. And here's what he said. He said, there's a difference in modulating your power so that you become, he gave the analogy of a child who is born, a child prodigy who comes here knowing the instrument or knowing their whatever their craft is. But as they grow and develop, they learn to become a maestro. They grow into that. He also gave me an analogy that you're softer, you're more powerful, you're brighter, but it's like a soft bulb. You know, the bulb, the iridescence of a bulb is a soft lit bulb instead of a natural bright light. They're the same, but it's not as glaring or blaring. So I guess I must have graduated, because he told me I've kind of done that. So it's this, you know, at first I was like, what do you mean? But then I breathed into it and tried not to take it personally and tried to see. And I just did what, I don't know what I did to become softer, to be honest. But I'm standing more fully in my power. I have to be in doing this work. I just have to be, I guess.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to further think about it conceptually, only because then you can put it down on paper. But I think what you seem to be touching upon is this idea of inner authenticity, and you talked about inner and outer in your work. And there's something about inner authenticity, perhaps, that helps to perhaps helps to be in the world uh, with a wisdom, you know, as if authenticity has levels of maturity or levels of development, rather than it just being a, you know, one thing in itself. So
Well, I think this
yeah.
is the moment that we're in, Dr. Gazawa. I mean, the angelic realm has confirmed this all over the place, in that this is the time for the feminine. And this is the rise of the feminine. And so in order for us to bring it, we have to know what to bring. We have to be in touch with what to bring and how to bring it, and then come with it, because that's what the world needs.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you, Joanne. And in the interest of time, I mean, I've asked Sunshine a lot of questions on this journey, and I'm very familiar with your work. The only thing I would ask, you ended by acknowledging the power of women of color at this time in the US, in politics and in many other spaces. And one of your contributions is a guidebook to hold sacred sister circles. If you very briefly, for everybody here, tell us what can this guidebook give us as we are listening to you? What does it give?
It replicates the work. So it talks about some of I'm reticent to call them my original, but what I heard Spirit bring as rituals, what were some of our activities, what they're in there. The guidebook, with some flexibility for whomever uses it to be able to infuse their own subject matter or what have you, but it's a kind of play-by-play of how you do it. It's a skeletal form of it, and it's a really tangible document that someone can replicate these circles. And there's circles that are happening all over the place. This is just one that is doctoral research, though, so this certainly encourages another initiating inquirer to I'm hoping some of your students will cite Dr. Coleman and say, I'm going to use FPAOI that Dr. Coleman has in her dissertation, whatever. I'm presuming doctor, but y'all can go talk about it.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say, that it's for students, that are searching for a method, that want to create this kind of circle process to sort of co-create knowledge with others, that this guidebook really kind of walks them through some of the ways to do that, and is a great resource. So just wanted to highlight.
I think other scholars can do it though too. That's why I say if someone wants to build on their work that exists already, they can use it too.
Professor Keating and Professor Gazawa, any other comments, or are we ready to go into a breakout session to confer?
Yes, I'm ready.
Me too.
Shireen, I think you can.
So the committee is going to go into a breakout session to confer, and then Sunshine, you can continue hosting a discussion. All right.
All right, dear people, as the committee deliberates, we have an opportunity to engage with Sunshine Michelle with our own questions. So I want to invite you, if you have a comment or a question, you can either jot it down in the chat or raise your hand or put your name in the chat and we'll call on you. Questions and comments for our beloved Reverend Sunshine Michelle. Is it Chimine? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Please.
Shameen. It's Shameen.
Shameen, please.
Yeah.
Apologies.
No worries. Sunshine, Adiba wrote me on Facebook. She's like, you need to get onto Sunshine's defense right now because you're really going to like this. And she was spot on. We didn't know much about each other's work. And during my dissertation process, much of what I agonized over and tried to work through was that positionality of being a white passing woman of color, of being half white and half Latina. And, sort of looking at complicitness in like the Latina community and like whiteness, and also not having a sense of belonging or a place to be. And that was really hard for me, was finding my sense of belonging as a woman of color. And now teaching classes, women of color classes, and seeing so many of my students, my women of color students, experience the same thing. So listening to your work, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you did, because, I see what's going on in the world, and really we need a place to come together as women of color. And you did that. So just thank you so much for that. Beautiful, beautiful work.
That's so sweet, Shameen. Thank you, darling. Good to see you on. Thank you, Dr. Ditaville, for Facebooking her. And can I turn to Dr. Debbie Fleckinger, because I know she has a burning question, and I've lived with, if she's still on, Shereen.
She had to go.
She had to go. Okay. Thank you for saying that.
Commented earlier.
Okay.
There's two requests in the chat. One is that a couple of folks have requested you recite R43. And then there's also a question from Chip McNeil. After you rest, what's next for you?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. And I'm happy to recite the R43. There's a book in here. Spirit downloaded a book from a dream like 2 months ago. And it was like, I wasn't even thinking about a book. I need to write about bringing our layers to the table for women of color and the complexity of what all that includes. So there's a book, there's speaking, there's writing, there's, you know, if y'all want to have me teach or speak or whatever it is, I'm up for that. You know, I'm turning a corner in my career. And so there's lots for me, Chip, that, you know, for me to do. I see my chair over here. So I'll go to the R43 next, but yeah, you want to?
Hi, okay. I'm on screen, right? I'm not sure, I can't tell from here.
Yes.
I can see Anna Louise. Joanne, are you there too?
Yes.
Okay, so we're all
I'm here.
unmuted. And we would like to, your committee would like to congratulate you, Dr. Reverend Sunshine Michelle Coleman.
Dr. Sunshine Michelle, we love you. We're so proud and inspired by your work.
Oh, can you put on gallery view, Shireen? Oh, is it me?
I think you have to set your own view, yes.
No, over.
There you go. So you can see everybody.
Can you take a screenshot, Shireen, for me? Oh my goodness, I know. Just take screenshots so I can see. Oh, you guys are so beautiful. Thank you. Oh, it's just so sweet. I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Sunshine, is there anything that you feel called to share before we continue with?
I love that question. Yes, thank you. I didn't pay her to say that because here's something I had to cut out of this. My Angeligram team had an embodiment of Indian goddess Durga, not even a week ago. And she was powerful. And she said, and I asked her, you know, when she was done speaking, I said, Goddess Durga, I am defending my doctoral dissertation on Friday. Is there anything that you would have me say to these people? And she said, well, there was two things. She said, to remind people, Mikhail says it all the time, that this is the time for the balance of the feminine. That this is a time for women's leadership to rise. And she said that it was inappropriate at whatever time for the masculine to feel as though it could have a power over feminine. And that is part of what needs to come into balance. And to be reminded that the masculine is in service to the feminine. And that the masculine comes from the creativity of the feminine. And so we need to breathe through that. And then the other piece of it, Shireen, thanks for the question, is the very next day. Saturday was Durga. Sunday, in the Thrive community, Reverend Ben McBride of the Bring the Heat campaign said so beautifully that he realized there needed to be a balance of the feminine. He said the exact same thing. And he said that he was delivering a message to people. And an African woman came up to him afterwards and let him know there was a different approach he could take. And he said at first he was defensive about it. But get this, he prayed into it and realized that she was right. And that's the thing, you bring your, Durga said that, I asked her, how do those without womb, that's the way she said it, how do they come to this place of realizing the feminine? Even within us, you know, we have the masculine and the feminine within us. And she said it's through spiritual technologies. He said it's through a space of wonder, like to come to it. So I'm saying to you, because this is a community thing, this is a time, such a time as this. Listen, I was supposed to defend this dissertation in my mind on my birthday next month on November 13th. The angelic realm said, you're ready well ahead of time. And before I knew it, May will tell you, she said, you're ready to defend now. And I was like, well, wait. And so what I realized is that my birthday is after the election. And I was brought to completion. This has not been an easy task, by the way, for this completion to come. I was brought to completion well ahead of the election so that we could come together and create this vibrational healing resonance. I skipped that, I didn't tell you about that. This vibrational healing resonance of healing that goes out into the world prior to this election. And it's more than the election. But so there was a reason why we had to be together today. There was that reason. So that's what I have to say. And Durga said, basically, she was responding to me, and then she said, if you have the courage to say it. And I almost was like, I'm challenged. Yeah, I do. You know, I didn't want to raise up on a goddess. But of course, I knew it was mine to say. So thank you for asking that question. And now shall I recite the R43?
Perhaps Adiba could ask her question first, and then you could recite in closing.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, I have no question. I just wanted to say I love you. I am so proud of you. I am just so thrilled to be in this moment of time with you. And that's all. I just wanted to acknowledge you and just, I'm in awe, and I'm just so blessed to be in this space with you and to share our chair. Y'all, you don't even know, to have May Alawar as your chair is a divine experience like no other. It is just, it is so divine.
On that, that's right.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I just wanted to acknowledge you and say thank you, and I love you, and I'm so proud of you. Welcome to the other side.
I see you have your sweatshirt on. Thank you,
Oh,
Dr.
yeah.
D.
I'm not taking this off for days. I'm not even gonna wash it. I'm just gonna sleep in it.
You know, Ph.D. and I'm gonna order mine too.
Ashe.
Yeah, Ashe. Let's see. We end at 3 and it's 2:50. And so, Shireen, is there another question? Because this one, I can end with this. This is 4 minutes. So is there another question?
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions or comments. You can raise your hand by clicking on the participant bar at the bottom, or you can just.
I see Jay Manuel's hand.
All right, Jay Manuel, please. The mic is yours.
So, Sunshine Michelle, it's really so uplifting to be witnessing this place in the journey that you've arrived at, and that it's not actually an end, but a movement to even more. You mentioned a book that will be coming out of this work. There's more innovation in the work yet to emerge. Feeling really proud of you. And I have to say that I'm sitting here too as a member of the Board of Trustees for CIIS. I am on that board, and so I'm sitting here as an institutional witness of your moment in defending your dissertation. Blessings, blessings.
Oh, thank you. That comes full circle, J. Manuel. I didn't know you were on the board because I used to work at CIIS. And so, you know, and I don't now, and I'm finishing my dissertation. And so that just comes all the way back around.
Yeah, in fact, I had a meeting at 8:30 this morning with the CIIS, one of the committees of the board, and at 5 today, I have a meeting with the executive committee of the board, and all day tomorrow, I'm in a meeting of the full board at CIIS. So yeah, you have an institutional witness here for this moment.
That's good.
Beautiful. So we have 2 more questions, and I think we're going to leave it at this so that you can close with R43. Sunshine Michelle, first is Venicia, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
That's
and then
right.
Mary Claire, you're next.
Beautiful. Thank you. You did very well, actually, with my name. It is Venicia. And I am having 2 quick questions. One is, will you facilitate a training so that people can use the workbook that you've provided at the highest level? That's the one. And then the second part is, I'm wondering, would you advise using this same process with a diverse group of women?
Absolutely. I would either be willing to adapt the workbook so it's written more for initiating inquirers doing research, but it's adaptable by anyone. So absolutely, I could use that. And, you know, I'm a circle keeper, so I know how to, you know, adjust, and there's room for the adjustment. I'm sorry, Dr. Anna Louise had to get off of the line to hear your question is one that she had relative to, would I do it with mixed group? And which I used to do. This is my first circle with women of colors. Yes, and 2 things, Venicia. I had hoped within the Sacred Sister Circle that we could invite at one of the sessions 1 or 2 other women, perhaps a white woman or an immigrant woman. And I introduced that to the group so that we could talk. And the circle, there were several people that said, I don't feel safe. And there were a couple people that said, you know, they would even like to see it with only Black women, because each cultural group has their own issues to address, and even issues within the group. And it's viable. So I envision that one of the things next, Chip, that I plan to do is to, I've heard having a sacred circle center is what I would like to devise, and have other circle keepers in it, so that we do our own work. There's circles are all over the place, and that we create safe space for intersection of the circles, which embraces what you're talking about. And you know, there's only one mind, Venicia. I just learned several weeks ago, and I see that Ruth is on the line. I don't know if Champion is, but I learned that I know two ministers who are already doing the intersecting work. And they're partnering. So one is working with African-American women, and one is working with white women, and they bring the circles together. So it's already happening, and yes, I would like to do that. And I'm realizing through the Sacred Sister Circle that there's more work that we have to do.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mary Claire, you are next, and I'm also going to just get in this question from Joyce Dawn. So if you can weave the answers together.
Yeah.
Dr. Reverend Sunshine Michelle. Joyce asked, what motivated you to take your journey to become a PhD and do this research? That, and Mary Claire, if you'd like to offer your perspective question, please do.
I don't want to take the time away from your closing, but Dr. Sunshine Michelle Coleman, I just want to offer gratitude for bringing in the essential participation of the angelic realm I figured that that's why you were defending early, and gratitude for what you're bringing in for the election. I too am surprised by the participation of that realm, which is why I'm offering blessings from the Temple of Goddess Spirituality dedicated to Sekhmet here in Cactus Springs, Nevada. Much gratitude and many blessings.
Yes, we have, thank you, Mary Claire. We have had embodiment from Goddess Mother Sekhmet, and she knows about this work and condones it too. So it's all one big happy party family on the human and the divine side. And I want to answer Joyce's question. Tell me again, Shireen, what it is. Why did I choose to do this? It's real easy, Joyce. It's like, because I heard the call. One of my favorite intention statements I live by is, I hear and act upon my divine inner messages without hesitation. I hear and act upon my divine inner messages without hesitation. That means that as I've honed the muscle and the practice of listening, you got to be willing to listen, and then you got to do it. You got to be obedient. You know, you could have the message and not do anything, and what good is that? Because you're not answering. And then you're praying off to something that you want, you know, get done, and you're not doing what it's telling you to do. And the more faith you have and trust you have, it doesn't matter what the message is, because you know it's divine. So you just do it. So I heard it, and so I went and did it. And here you go. So, beloveds, I'm going to close with the R43 tribute. Let's take a breath together. Just breathe in and just let it go. Remember, this is a piece that was inspired by a number of the scholars who showed on the screen, and as I was reading them, you know, this is a highly academic work. It's a left brain work, if you will, but I'm in a right brain capacity, and so I was hearing something as in the words were jumping off the page to me. And so anyway, all these R words, these words that started with R started popping off. So here we go. As we rise into our healing as powerful women of colors through epistemic gathering, fluid adaptability, and collaborative innovation with the reclamation of the pride of our ancestors and elders, as we continue to dwell in perpetual recuperation from centuries of transgressions that continue against our people, as we recalibrate and recalculate from the ongoing marginalization and oppression of our colonized hegemonic society from time immemorial, as we form our own resistance through recognition of our solidarity across identity intersections of gender, class, sexuality, nation, ability, and race, through our sense of decolonizing feminism and our spirits for the 99%, with the return of who we really are through the lineages of our mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. My grandmother, by the way, Grammy-O. As we rewire, recollect, and reinterpret ourselves from the lies of colonialization and appropriation of our cultural and spiritual practices through revisionist myth-making and storytelling of the remembrance and the resilience and fortitude of our people that have set the pathway for us to rise and thrive into survivance through practices that yield transformative justice. As we reconceptualize and reconstruct our systems to become devoid of domination through the renaming of ourselves anew, while redefining, revising, and rewriting the old to reunite the whole, as we recommit to revitalize, restore, and reconstruct our cultural heritage and brilliance that has been passed down through eons of generations, as we embrace the luminous revolutionary within us that serves and supports decolonization that is a pittance of the remuneration that we deserve as powerful, original, colorful people on the planet, as we reconcile with each other through forgiveness and love so that we may live together in harmony, peace, and support in community, as we redefine and recapture who we are and our reconnection with ourselves and with each other through our cultural and spiritual pasts in the recovery and reformation of who we really are, with the resurgence and resurrection of the divine that is always flowing through our body, mind, spirit. As we reformulate our past, present, and future through the bridge called our back and our bridge called home. As we regenerate through the cocooning and chrysalis process from caterpillars to butterflies and recreate our renewal and rebirth through disruption and reinvention of our ethical feminism, regardless of what anyone else thinks. It is then that we exercise freedom and liberation as redemptive and relational to the land, spirituality, sovereignty, and to each other. Through our recognition and re-evaluation of what has disempowered us so that we can re-empower ourselves to show up fully and completely as our true whole self in every situation, to express authentically from our very core and original nature. As we honor these R43 qualities as important dimensions of ourselves and our ability as women of colors to live our lives fully, completely, and impactfully for ourselves, each other, and our communities. As we make a direct contribution to the realization of our indigeneity that honors our radical epistemology of living our knowledge without borders, living our ontology as ways of doing, and living our axiology as ways of being a positive change in our communities and in our world just as we are. As we practice complexity as a sacred pathway of interconnectivity and interdependence, we then allow our souls to breathe and just be. Thank you for asking, and thank you for letting me share. And as we prepare to conclude, can I just have y'all come off mute, and we're gonna have a concluding ooh-hoo of the gallery view. We're gonna have a ooh-hoo, aha.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Congratulations.
Hey!
Yes.
Congratulations, Dr. Coleman.
I'm proud of you.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yay, so proud.
Big work.
Lovely.
Big work.
Beautiful.
Big work. Big work.
Yay, sunshine.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank y'all.
So beautiful.
So next.
Yeah, see you Monday, maybe.
Yeah, you'll see me.
You're going to be, it's going to be really interesting.
Congratulations, Michelle.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Reverend
Oh,
Doctor.
Congratulations.
no, big hugs. Big hugs. Powerful work. Powerful work.
All right.
Okay, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for making it so.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Doreen, what do I do? Should I stop it? I'm scared to stop it.
Stop it. So let's see the recording. We're going to stop.
But will it save?
Yes, it will save in the cloud.